Hello, everyone. I'm going to get started in just a few minutes. Let everybody kind of trickle in. While we're doing that, we'll kick off with a little bit of music.
In the world of software, I'm the one that they call the asset manager, the keeper of the code and all.
Take time to drop in the chat where you're calling from. We'd love to identify where everybody's kind of calling in from around the world.
There's a lesson here, let me unwrap. You see, this job ain't just about the zeros and ones. It's about the lessons that life surely stuns. Managing assets, it's a twisted game for sure, but it teaches you to handle life's
Officially coast to coast again now. Everywhere in between.
All right. Go ahead and stop the music. Just to let you know, that's one of a song that one of the fellow ITAM SCs went out and used AI to create. If you didn't get it, it's around asset management and some of the struggles that we deal with asset management. Really cute song. So I'll drop the link to it in the chat if you're interested in kind of using it in any discussions you have maybe around the office in your location. So, Rich, you want to tell them where you're calling in from? I'll kind of join into that afterwards.
Yeah, definitely. So again, hi everyone. Richard Cheek calling in from Long Island, New York. Got a nice storm rolling through right now. A couple flashes of thunder. Hope the weather's nicer where you're all coming in from.
And I'm calling from Houston, Texas. So we just had the storm. Probably not the same storm Rich is going through, but we had that lovely hurricane that blew in. I guess it's been about almost 2 weeks ago. Luckily back on power. Little shout out to all the linemen that were in the Houston area and making sure that we get back up and running. So again, thanks for putting in the chat where you're calling from, and we'll go ahead and kick this party off. Right. So for looking forward statement, of course, anything that we say that's possibly on our roadmap or things that are in development, keep in mind those could adjust or change as we go through. I don't think anything today will be really forward-looking. Everything will be something that's out of the box. But if for some reason it is, we will make sure to call that out. Agenda. So we're going to kind of talk about assets. What kind can you use in the mapping of, the indoor mapping that we provide? It does come within 2 of our products in the asset space. So we'll talk about both of those. We'll also do an indoor mapping overview, just kind of what does it encompass and how do you use it? And then the meat of the call today will really be when Rich goes in and does a demo. So he's going to show us how to bring those maps in, identify the space, and then ultimately tie those assets to those locations. Really just deep dive into the capabilities of what you can do within your own instance. Then we'll close up with upcoming events, things that we have going on, update y'all on some of the resources that we have out there to help you ultimately do your job day in and day out. Then, as we always do, we'll turn off the recording and open it up to anybody that would like to come off and ask questions. Or if you have questions as we go through, please put them in the Q&A and we'll go through and answer those. So why do we do this session? For the people that have joined, I apologize, you're going to hear this over and over and over again, but there's always new people that are on the webinar, so we want to make sure that they understand why we developed this and ultimately what it is, along with talking about what's coming up in our next session. So we did this, both Rich and I have been practitioners in the space and have struggled with understanding capabilities and features that are new released or how to move through an implementation phase. So we really wanted to come together and kind of build a community, right, Rich? Making sure that we all come together and support each other. So not just Rich and I supporting y'all, but each one of you supporting each other as well. So this is a way to ultimately get in front of what you might consider the experts, us, right, and ask questions. But ultimately, you can also add detailed. So if we say something or a question's asked, we'd love to get your feedback of how you did it. If that's something that's been successful, or maybe not how to do something if you run into struggle. So use the chat feature to do that.
Yeah.
And then go ahead, Rich. Yeah.
We always love a good pitfall story. We've got plenty of them ourselves, right, where people trip up
Do
and
not do this. Exactly.
learn from our mistakes. So yeah, chime in, throw them in the chat. We're happy to turn those into discussions towards the Q&A. Come off mute. Let's keep the conversation going.
Yeah, this is a very informal webinar session. It's really just making sure that we're building that community and chatting with you. So, and then in true ServiceNow fashion, as we are alcoholics, we and meeting with the beers with engineers, we do like to use this time as an excuse to get a glass of wine. Both Rich and I, it's the end of our day, and so this is our opportunity to kind of get started with our dinner, dinner wine or something like that. So Rich, you want to go first and talk about your wine?
Definitely. So Michelle has had to listen to me talk about cycling and riding my bike places. It's kind of been a hobby that I have adopted. And in honor of the Tour de France coming to an end this past weekend, I picked up a bottle of wine from France. It's from the Burgundy area. The grape is a Pinot Noir. I believe over there they name them after the towns and cities that they come from and the area. So this, again, is like a Burgundy. It's like a nice light red wine. So I haven't had this one yet. I did a bad job opening it. I just noticed a piece of cork floating around in it. So shame on me. If anyone has tips on how to avoid that, that would be cool. But somebody said we're going to give it the 5 S's. So here we go. Tastes like a pretty good red wine. Nice and light and airy, not too bold, I guess, like some hearty Italian wines I might have had. So pretty go well with a nice meat and cheese board, a charcuterie board, if you would. So what are you drinking today, Michelle?
So I'm going out of the box. For anybody that's joined, you probably have heard me say time in and time out. Wine is new for me, right? Like it's not something that I have any expertise in at all. And so I'm probably going to make a few people really upset with my wine choice. But I went out and I said I wanted to find the most interesting wine that I could find. So I kind of scoured the shelf and, where's the most interesting wine, but on the bottom, right, where nobody looks. And I found this taco vine wine. So it's technically a Dutch chocolate with a red wine. So it is a twist top. So, there we go. I didn't have the whole cork incident. That probably shows how cheap I am too. And I'm going to put it in my sippy cup and try a little bit. I am a sweet wine drinker. I have known that. So I tend to not lean towards red. So I'm kind of interested to see with the chocolate if this will make it a little bit sweeter than I normally find. I like it. It's sweet.
What's not to like about chocolate and wine?
It's like drinking chocolate. Yeah, there's just a little flavor of wine after the fact that kind of lingers around, but actually pretty decent. So it kind of goes with my Kahlua drink, and how I like that piece of it. So I figured it was a win-win for me.
Awesome.
So if you have time, try it.
I was gonna say, someone wrote in the chat, Michelle, chocolate wine is great, really, really cold. So toss it in the fridge.
Yeah, so I put it in their fridge, but maybe if I chill it for a little bit and put it on some ice. And I did pull it out 30 minutes ago in preparation, so it's a little bit warmer than probably it should be. But thanks for the tidbit. Awesome. And then this is our QR code for our next session, which we'll dive into a little bit further into our conversation today. Another slide is people, process, and technology. You'll hear us say this time in and time out. It's really around the framework of asset management. In order to be successful, you have to have all three, right? So you have to make sure stakeholders are involved whenever they're, when you're looking at, implementing an ITAM process, making sure your processes are good, tweaked over time, and constantly maturing your processes. And then where we're meeting you at today is the technology and helping you develop put those processes in an automated fashion to ultimately, keep from doing redundant task time in and time out. Where we're going to actually land today, I know this is indoor mapping for hardware asset. When we talk about that, whenever I labeled the specific webinar session, but it really falls into two spaces within our asset management program. So not just hardware asset management, but enterprise asset. So any of those non-IT devices, you also have this capability to be able to bring in the maps and define those assets to that location. And I can always talk about a little bit what's kind of best practice when you are looking about what kind of assets to map, because you hear it and you get really excited, especially whenever Rich is going to show us the done product of being able to go into a room and see all the assets in that room. It's pretty amazing and pretty useful from an asset perspective. But I have met with multiple customers, and one challenged me and said, "Well, what about laptops? Like, how do you maintain a laptop in a location, like a room, a designated room?" And that's probably not the best use case, right? So just because it's an asset doesn't mean that it necessarily needs to be mapped on a location. And whenever I say location, all the way down to an office, right? Maybe that asset is tied to an individual, and that individual is tied to the asset or to the location, right? And then that's how you define it, is by who you associate that asset to. This kind of fills some of those gaps for those shared devices, things of that nature, where maybe you don't want to tie it to a specific individual. You want to tie it to a location. So Rich, some of the ones I've heard, I'm curious to get some insight from you and your customers, but access points was a really good use case. Being able to identify which room they're in and which ceiling they're residing in. HVAC system, those aren't going anywhere. They're not moving around. They're going to kind of stay in one location. Those are a couple I've heard. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, coming from my days at the university, right? All the different, every room's got a smart board up there, the Crestron panels to control those, the podiums that have all the different equipment in them. I mean, a university, again, is a perfect example. You might have a room with 50 devices in it for students to utilize, shared meeting spaces, kind of all those areas definitely hold true to mapping assets. Something that also is kind of cool in the enterprise space, like, is the idea of a linear asset. So maybe you're a transportation company responsible for roadways, and you have all of your streetlights and stop signs and mile markers kind of laid out on those screens. There's kind of solutions on the platform to manage all of that.
That's a good call out. I'm sure a lot of linemen here in Houston probably wish or really have some capabilities around that, because I can't tell you one street light that was up after the storm, right? Everything really went out. So that's a really good use case, being able to map it, right? And not just put a number associated with their latitude, longitude, but being able to have a visual and provide that to the linemen that aren't local, maybe, right? That's a really good use case, like that one.
Awesome.
This is specific to hardware, so we're going to kind of transition back to hardware. And just keep in mind, a lot of this can go into software, but this was released in our Vancouver release. So the indoor mapping you can see here, and that's just showing you if you are on Vancouver or Washington, D.C. release, you do have the ability to turn this on and ultimately use it within your environment. And this is just a pre-visual prior to running into Rich's demonstration, but this is kind of what the indoor mapping is going to look like when you have it fully deployed, and being able to identify all the way down to a desk, maybe an office or a data center, being able to identify, corridors and things of that nature that might have assets in them. One of my EAM customers was interested in maintaining pictures. They had a very expensive paintings on the wall. So this might be a good use case for that, right? Being able to identify which paintings where within the office building. And then you can see here we have the asset list. And where this really becomes useful is reducing time, right? Which is ultimately saving money, but reducing time locating those assets, minimizing manual asset tracking efforts, and then being able to ultimately define a hierarchy. So in our case, it's campus, building, floor, and plate.
Yeah, and to kind of add on that too, where again, back to that university example, but many businesses do this where they outsource their field support, their field services. And folks might not be familiar with the layout of a campus, whether it's a building, a room, right? When I was doing asset refreshes over there, I'd send a group of technicians out to a building and I would have to get a piece of paper, or maybe our facilities team sent over that building's drawings, and I would draw them a map on how to get to the building and where the room is and kind of how to approach it that way. So when you're starting to look at this, especially from a more distributed support model, it's really valuable, you know, to help folks get around and do their jobs.
Yeah, and I'll first apologize. I started the wine poll and forgot to turn it off. So thanks for everybody that made some suggestions. We'll definitely take those and use those later. But hopefully that's out of your way now and you can continue moving forward. We'll have a few polls and sometimes I'll throw them up without saying anything, but good thought. So let's jump in. So in order to get the indoor mapping application, you actually have to go into the store. So if we jump real quick, we go over here. This is the ServiceNow store. So store.servicenow.com. All I did was put indoor mapping. It gave me several options. And the reason is because we have indoor mapping with a few different products. So you would look for the indoor mapping for assets here, and then you would request that. And then kind of, I guess we can kind of say that the other product that indoor mapping goes with is workspace delivery. So workspace delivery is kind of like, I guess the example I use is when COVID hit, you know, kind of that hoteling space where you would go and check out spaces and be able to ultimately define that you were coming in and reserve that space for yourself, or an office, you know, like a conference room, things of that nature. But that's the other capability that we have. And Rich, I think whenever you go into your demonstration, you can kind of talk about the differences in that.
Definitely.
Okay. And we'll go ahead and jump into the demonstration. I'll stop sharing real quick.
I will steal it over this way. So yeah, workspace delivery, it's just that kind of, it's a product that we offer to help workspaces manage more of those facilities-based requests. So visitor management coming in, right? Like maybe you, like Michelle said, do hoteling of desks. You're bringing folks on into your organization, planning meeting spaces, conference room availability, and mapping those spaces really plays kind of a role in that. So right now, though, we're going to start in the hardware asset workspace. We've seen this probably a couple times on this call. Again, that mission control where folks using Ham Pro are able to come and start doing their work. So we're going to visit first is actually the asset estate. And this is the area that helps you get a good picture of your assets at your organization, where they are, what states they might be in, and all that fun stuff. But where we're going to live today is in our indoor mapping area. And again, this is turned on when you activate that plugin. It activates all of these maps. We have like an integration with OpenStreetMaps here. So all this kind of starts pulling in once you activate that plugin. So first, we'll take a look at a little bit of demo data. This was built very nice and cleanly by our product teams to kind of showcase what this might look like out there. So again, hi, I'm a New Yorker. I'm going to use our New York City campus as an example. This is, I think, a courthouse location actually in Lower Manhattan, down by the financial district, mapped, you know, on real streets out there. So like all these streets are real. You can map this to where your organization's buildings are. But we brought it in, right? We outlined 2 buildings. Each building has a couple of floors here. So, you know, see floor 1, floor 2. And then you can also pull up a list on the side here of the locations, the rooms in that building, and then start clicking in on them and seeing what assets are located where. These filters you could clear out, customize, kind of slice them and dice them however you'd like. But again, it starts getting that picture into, hey, these assets are in these locations. So again, we kind of built that, but I'd like to take us today through kind of the setup of how this works. It's pretty straightforward. I haven't done this. Oh, I just did a thumbs down. I like when Zoom kind of pops up the little emojis right there. So we don't want a thumbs down. We want a thumbs up, everybody.
Only on.
But anyway, yeah. So let's take a dive in here for a minute. We're going to go to our mapping studio. So again, this gets activated when you turn that store plugin on. And Mapping Studio, if you're familiar with UI Builder in ServiceNow, the Studio application to build scope applications, it's an area of the platform we built to help folks do things quickly and easily. So I guess the first thing we should kind of talk about, and maybe I'll dial back here to make it a little bit more visual, is how ServiceNow outlines locations. And that is through the idea of a campus, right? So we can have different campuses. And this is just a logical grouping. I guess they could be spread out in different areas where you have certain buildings. But again, going back to that university example, it makes a lot of sense to me. In that campus, you can have multiple buildings. In those buildings, you can have multiple floors. And in those floors, you can have multiple rooms. And again, those room types can be defined. We'll take a look at them in a minute, some of our different choices over there. So back to that mapping studio, right? We have the ability to create a campus. And that campus, again, holds buildings, rooms, and floors. So let's just say we wanted to add a new building into our campus, right? I'm going to go through this now, but remove it for a demo. So, a test building 2, we'll call it. And we could define a location. So maybe our campus is New York City, and we're going to say, let's map out Penn Station, right? I love taking the LIRR in. So for our local Long Islanders, I'm sure you're well aware of that, but that's our form of transportation into New York City. But it allows us to create that building, pins on the location, and then we add our floors. Now, this is kind of where the magic happens. So, for the sake of this demo, I'm going to add a floor here. I'm not going to upload it. It does take a few minutes to kind of process the file. But in our ITAM applications, so ham and EAM, we can upload a PNG file. So that's a graphic file. It's similar to a JPEG, right? But a lot of times our facilities teams will have our floors mapped out as different types of files in tools like AutoCAD. And they can export, again, those PNG files. So something like this, I went on Google. I didn't create this file myself. I looked up an example floor plan in a PNG. I said, this looks like it could be an office building. And I uploaded it into the platform. Again, click add a floor, drop that file in here. It takes a couple minutes to process, and it spits out that drawing, again, that we kind of saw before in here. Now, if you're a customer of WSD, Workspace Delivery, you can actually import those AutoCAD files. There's some more robust functionality around that with those different files. Workspace Service Delivery is really intended to allow you to map routes between buildings, map out your fire extinguishers, your stairwells, a lot of that health and safety information that our businesses are responsible for. It's aimed at those, and those customers typically will have them drawn out in an AutoCAD type solution and bring them in. But we can mirror a lot of that functionality, in terms of asset management. We care about where's our room and where's the assets. We could get to that goal here just by uploading these image files.
Yeah, and I just dropped in the chat feature, I dropped a link to WSD so you can understand what the difference is and kind of the different use cases. Again, there's better together stories within assets, but we're going to stay focused on the asset portion of it today.
Yep. So then we have to come into the tool and map out our rooms here. Again, it might be a little tedious at first. It's definitely an implementation uplift. The good news is, if you were a growing company acquiring lots of locations and buildings, yeah, maybe you might be doing this a lot. This is typically a one-time deal. Our businesses are not typically renovating that often, where these floor plans will change and you're making a lot of updates. This is kind of a set it and forget it activity in mapping your rooms. So in here, it's a nice, easy tool. We define the polygons. These are the barriers, I guess, of the room. So I mapped out 2 already in this building, but it's as simple as clicking the 4 corners of the wall out here, going back to the one you start on. It's how you end that, and giving that room a name. So we'll call this, meeting room 2. Meeting room 2. And then we could define what type of place this is. So again, pre-populated are a lot of the common selections you might find in a building, from an auditorium, again, to bike parking. But, in this case, we care about it as a meeting room. And again, it's on floor 1. If you wanted to go crazy and start adding room entrances and markers, you could. For the sake of what we're doing and our goals, I think this will suffice. So that creates that room. We've got our mile markers, if you would, our polygons in there, and we have our new location. So now we have to go out, and there's actually a tool that will map these spaces into the locations table in ServiceNow, right? So again, we're staying in one tool, one platform, one common data model to go out and say, hey, the things we're mapping out here, let's align them to the locations table in ServiceNow.
And just for everybody's awareness, we're doing one room at a time. In your use case, you would probably want to do all that, the polygon all up front, right? And just find the
100%.
room, not
Yeah.
come in one and, and start mapping back and forth.
Yes.
But just for sake of time, we're going to do one room to just show you what ultimately you're trying to do.
Yeah, exactly. So you're going to do one floor at a time. It's probably a good way to approach it. Depends on how big your business are. Your team's going to tackle that, how often you're doing it. But yeah, it's a great call out, Michelle. So what we did, I went to the indoor mapping studio. Clicking around now, the mad clicker. I'm coming over to campuses. In our campus list, again, this is the data model, campus, building, floor, room. There is a functionality to synchronize this with the CMN location table. I think it's an interesting choice for our teams to actually call out the table name. For those familiar with it, it's CMN_locations. So we're going to synchronize our changes that we're making with that table. So this utility runs through here. The first thing it checks is, are there any new campuses that you've defined out in your campus? And in this case, we didn't make any changes, so we could just go to the next step. It takes a couple seconds to process here. You'll notice the state is building. It's going to flip to completed here shortly. Now we're going to look at our floors. Again, we did not add a new floor, so we're going to move through that change. If you added things here, you'd be presented with different options. We'll see what that looks like in a minute. And while this is loading up, I do see a question in the chat, Robert. Ask that in the Q&A. I think it'd be very beneficial to double click on that and dive in a little bit further. So next up, we are linking our indoor map place types to the location place types on the locations table. I know that sounds kind of confusing saying it out loud, but essentially the historical locations tables in ServiceNow are at a lower level of granularity to what the indoor mapping team can provide for workspace service delivery and mapping over there. But essentially, we're aligning a meeting room type to a room. I did this already in the past, but we link those together. That way, when it does create a new meeting room on the locations table, it knows how to fill out the fields on that form. In this case, no new changes, apply and next. All right, now we get to see something new here. So now we've added a room to our floor plan. Here's our two previous rooms, right? We had a conference room I'd mapped and a meeting room already. Meeting room 2 is now here. And we'll see that it does not map to a value on the locations table. This next step is going to create that. So we've got a few options in the operation. We have the option created here. Maybe you are mapping some stairwells or locations you don't want to create locations for. You can come in here and ignore those records too. When Michelle was saying you probably don't want to do these one at a time, if I made 10 changes, I'd have 10 blank rooms here, 10 options that we can create all at once to kind of speed that process up. But in this case, we have a new meeting room. We're going to create it, apply it next, groovy. So that's going to take a moment. It's going to process our operations and complete it. And we'll see we now have a new location out on the locations table. Again, this, for those who have used ServiceNow before, is the data model that you already have in place, that it's going to just create those records on that table. As somebody who's been on the platform for a long time, I do definitely appreciate the idea of a hierarchy of these locations, right? From a campus, building, room, floor kind of perspective, it definitely aligns to what folks have in the real world versus customers having to go create these configurations on their own. Definitely something I've seen in my past lives, something I did myself maybe 10 years ago on the platform, was kind of mirror the structure of a building on the locations table. So, from there, you can go out and map assets to those locations, whether you are uploading them on the form. If they're already, let's say you've already created those locations in the location table. Maybe this is something I could dial back to for a second. Let's say you're working in reverse, which I can imagine many customers are, where they already have the locations built on the platform in the locations table, and they're now creating indoor maps. You could come into this record and select from an existing location hierarchy in those buildings, right? So if I already had my locations created on the location table, I could just come in here and retroactively put them there, and that will reflect on the maps, right? So if I already have my assets assigned to locations, it's going to automatically pull them into those maps now that we kind of have that parallel drawn there. So that's kind of one way to do it. Alternatively, maybe you're brand new to the ServiceNow platform. This is exciting. You have your maps brought in there. You could then go into the assets themselves and populate the locations against them. So again, this is just the location table. I could come into New York, that map we were looking at before, dive into our New York City campus, go to our building, go to our floor, remember which room I put assets in, which is always the adventure. You're doing a demo. And you know, this was the old
Nothing
way
but like live demos, right?
right, this is kind of the old way to visualize where assets are in a room. Like, okay, I know in A203 I have a few assets out there. You know, again, that ties back to that indoor map if you were to go look at that location. So
This kind of goes back to a conversation you and I, Rich, had recently, right? About the location, and it kind of showing, you know, it's showing that location based on what you're entering in. So when Rich was entering in that meeting room, right, and he put meeting room 3, I think it was, or meeting room 1.
yeah,
if you have a meeting room 1 at multiple locations, it's going to show you meeting room 1, but when you drill into the actual field, you can see the hierarchy, right? But what you might consider is maybe looking at your naming scheme. Or instead of having meeting room 1, maybe put, the initials of the building and then meeting room 1, right? So that you don't have to drill into it and look at the hierarchy. It just shows it right there. So that's just something that me and Rich kind of talked about yesterday when we were running through this, just food for thought as you're going through it.
Yeah, that's a great call out. We had naming conventions for all of our buildings back at the university. Hauser Hall, HAU, I don't know, whatever. Take the first 3 letters of your building name and put it in front of the number. Another thing that I've seen customers do, again, it's a relational database. All of the information is accessible so long as it's referenced across the fields. So, we knew this was the New York campus, but you could put a read-only field. You can dot walk to the locations table and reflect up to whatever level you'd like and kind of show that data here. So tons of different ways to slice it. If you are a business with a lot of different locations, definitely a good idea to call out on the asset form, because like Michelle said, you might have a ton of meeting room 1s.
Yeah. And then the question, I'm sorry, are you done?
No, go ahead. I was just going to kind of show the parallel in enterprise asset, right? It's really the same. Yeah, it's the same solution there, honestly. You're going to see the same kind of dashboard idea. The 2 tools are very complementary of one another, because managing an asset is, a physical asset. At the end of the day, it's managing a physical asset. So again, you have an asset estate here. You have your indoor maps. There's no need to even really click in on these, because again, they are the same maps. But something I'm going to call out kind of cool, which is unique to enterprise assets, is again that idea of a linear asset. I kind of hit on a little bit earlier, where you can draw those assets out in a space. Again, if you're managing assets over an area, so maybe it's a roadway, maybe it is electrical wires, right, for the folks down in Houston, the linemen out there, to know where all the different transformers and things are. This is a really short road as an example, right? But you can kind of map these out latitude and longitudinally. I'm not going to say that again, to kind of plan those roadways out, those different assets out over a stretch of distance. So
love it.
Where I was going to land. Yeah, Michelle. So
yeah. So a couple, well, I guess one question and then one call out from somebody else. So I appreciate the call out. Let's start with the question. It's either Robert or Candace, not quite sure who's the one posting the question, but Canvas also do mapping for data centers, such as rack server level, etc. We do, so yes, you could leverage this to map out your data center and space and rack and things of that nature. We do also have what's called TNI, technology network.
Infrastructure.
Is it? Okay.
Think so? A lot of acronyms.
I know the acronym. I can't think of what it stands for, and I'll drop it in the chat, where they specifically go into the actual rack of a network, and then you can actually even get all the way down to ports within the network, and it comes with the ham capabilities along with additional features. It's specific to some of our telecom customers and things of that nature, but we can definitely follow up with some insight into that product. So good call out. Another use case is really around warehousing. That's a huge one, right? Being able to define where something is within the warehouse. So this would be extremely useful in being able to define what rack it's on, what space it's in. We give you the fields, but then being able to map it. So.
Yeah, that's a great call out, Michelle, right? If you're managing a lot of warehouses, whether it's hardware assets, maybe you're an MSP, you're stocking equipment for customers, all the way out through, if you're a large logistics company holding things for just whatever deliveries out there, you could map out those locations, which is really cool. To add on to the TNI functionality, I actually just sat in on a couple demos this week about rack mapping, and there's a lot of cool integrations that could happen out there, all the way down to managing the weight that those racks are capable to hold, the power infrastructure they have available remaining on them. And there's a slew of things that are way out of my wheelhouse that you could manage in that. So Robert, Candace, whoever was asking that question, definitely follow up your ServiceNow account teams. They'd be happy to kind of show what that looks like out there. I do see something else in the Q&A that is actually looks like more of I guess there is a question in there. Somebody had tried to activate this in one of their test instances, and there was a discrepancy in our documentation around which property had to be activated. So we can take that actually back to our product team. So thank you for calling that out, Terry, and kind of go through that there. I'm not.
So just be aware. Yeah.
What? Yeah,
I think it's great. Be aware, anybody that's on the call, if you're running into any struggles around being able to see these maps come up on workspaces, just know that you might need to go in and enable this plugin. So change it to true. Let me drop that in the chat in case
another thing that may have happened there. Again, I don't know the exact situation, but we've seen in the past, or at least in my past lives, turning on plugins occasionally. Not all of the plugins activate. You need to go in and click the little repair button. So I'm sure a lot of folks are familiar with activating plugins in the platform. Maybe it's a simple fix to repair it, because it does seem like that's something that should enable going on with that. It could also have been fixed in one of our later patches. So I guess, like Michelle said, be aware that is something that somebody has come across in the past. One more thing to show out that I actually meant to show a little bit earlier in configuring these maps. So when you are activating the maps, they are put into like a preview mode, if you would. You have to publish the content that is out there for them. So once you've gone and built it, right? So sometimes we're kind of in like a draft state. A lot of different solutions on the platform. You're in a draft state before you go live with a record or whatever. If you come into the view editor here, so again, you're in the mapping studio, view editor, click the edit button. Right now, it's not set that way, but if you come in here and you haven't made a change, it pops up asking you to, decide which content you want to share. You could go out, by default, it's no content. That's kind of that draft state, but you could share specific content or all content that you have out there. And yeah, that's the end of my demo here, Michelle.
Right. We're getting a call out for the music, so I'm going to drop that in the chat really quick.
Yeah.
It's cute. I love it. All right. Let me steal back the screen share real quick. Where is my...
Just stop. Maybe that'll pop it back up.
Yeah, let's try. There it goes. Okay. Share screen. All right. So lots of great collaboration and conversation going on, the Q&A and in the chat. So appreciate it. Keep it coming. Again, we will, at the end of this session, stop the recording and allow you to ask them live if you wanted to do that as well. We did want to call out kind of another option that's been out there, and we could probably go back and see when we released this, but it's been out for a little while. I would say probably Tokyo, maybe Utah. But we do offer a direct integration with Zebra MotionWorks. So if you already own the RFID capabilities within Zebra MotionWorks, you can actually do the integration. And this also gives you that, the real-time visibility into where your assets are using that RFID capability. I did reach out to our product team to, see is there kind of a way to leverage some of this and do the mapping capabilities. And with the latitude and longitude, you actually, which you can kind of see down here, you do have the way that also is information that's on the location table. So you could kind of use that as an audit feature to see, is it ultimately where it should be, or be able to tie that in together to do an update to the asset. So
Your
that's just
instincts were
one.
right, Michelle. It is Tokyo.
It was Tokyo. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. A few more things. So I think we'll definitely end a little early, but a few more things we kind of wanted to call out. Rich and I are actually getting on the road. So we've been on the road for a little while and doing a few workshops, but we thought it would be a good opportunity to kind of talk to y'all about some of the workshops we are doing. Keep in mind, these are like 101 workshops. So if you are fully invested and moving full speed ahead within Ham and Sam, these might not be a good use of your time, but they are kind of a lab session where we do give you the ability to go in and get your hands wet and be able to create models and do normalizations and things of that nature. So I'm kind of curious. We're going to do a poll launch, but I'm curious if any of these kind of look interesting to you. One, if they are, definitely reach out to your account team and look at seeing if we can get you registered and actually in one of the events. Rich will be doing the Virginia location. I'll be doing Illinois, California, and then Rich will be taking over the Waltham and New York location. So if one of these locations isn't close to you, I'm kind of curious, maybe are you interested in having a workshop come to your city? And maybe if we get enough people interested in one location, we can take that back to leadership and try and drive us over there. Maybe we can get us both in one location at one time.
Yeah, that'd be great.
That'd be cool.
At a winery.
Cool. Without it being knowledge, because that seems to be the one thing that me and you are usually together for. Yeah, we can bring a bottle of wine. Maybe we can try the same wine. So looks like a few people have gone in and answered. I'm going to give it about 10 more seconds for you to drop in if you're interested, and if you are, what city are you interested in? Again, Rich supports kind of the East Coast and Central U.S. commercial business, and I support the Central. You support South and East Coast, and I support Central and the West Coast business. But we definitely interact with each other and work side by side on a lot of different accounts as well.
Mississippi seems to be our dividing line.
Is that what it is? Mississippi River?
Yeah, the Mississippi River seems to be our dividing line. I don't know how accurate that is, but that's the easiest way I've been able to describe it to folks is I support east of the Mississippi, Michelle supports west of the Mississippi.
There we go. But yeah, we definitely piggyback off of each other. We're always talking to each other, floating ideas between each other. And then, when you get outside of commercial, there's whole extended team out there. So these are just the workshops we're running. There could be workshops in your area. So definitely reach out to your account team to see if there's anything that's already out there and scheduled. Okay, I'm going to end that poll. And I think we just have a couple more things. So Uncorking ITAM Excellence, our website went live. Thank you, Rich. Rich worked really hard on getting us up and going. I'm actually going to show you a little bit of a demonstration on the website. Give me just one second. Of course, my PowerPoint's not going to work with me. So it's your.servicenow.com UIE is the website landing page. Here you can go in and register for the upcoming sessions. So if I click register, it's going to take you out to Zoom as you've seen every time you've registered, and you would just come in here, put your registration in.
Yeah.
And then if you come down further, you can see some sessions that we've highlighted. The ITAM, Better Together seems to be a really big hit. We've had a lot of people participate. You can come here and watch the recording. If you wanted to reach out to Rich or myself or both, you can contact us here. Some product documentation. So if there's something interested in that around assets that we hit on that you maybe wanted to look a little bit more, you can go into the product documentation. And then the additional resources are all of our sessions that we've had so far. So if you're new to the Uncorking ITAM Excellence, or you've missed a session and didn't receive the follow-up email with that recording, you can always find that here. I don't know, Rich, if you want to drop that link really quickly into the chat, or if you've already done that. But
yeah, someone asked, I just plopped it in there, everybody.
Awesome. And then I will pull back up the slide deck that I seem to have closed. So, sorry. I need this one second. And as I'm doing that, Rich, do you want to talk about the session that we're doing next month?
Yeah, so next month we're going to be doing another Better Together between some of the other solutions on the platform, and one I think goes very well hand in hand with asset management. That is security and security operations. So we are going to be bringing on one of our colleagues to kind of talk about how those play together on the ServiceNow platform. So excited to get everyone out there. Again, that's going to be towards the end of August. I can't believe I'm saying that out loud, and it's only 4 weeks away. But that is going to be our next session coming up.
So we're going to go without slideware. I can, for whatever reason, I expanded it in full view. I cannot get it minimized, and I have that big monitor, 43-inch monitor, and y'all are not going to make out what I'm trying to show you in non-display mode. But we were really at the end of it anyways. So as
I'll
Rich
go ahead.
said,
I'll pull it up, Michelle, too. So we could stop
you.
the recording now. I'll get that back up. We could stare at that while we
yeah,
go
let's do that.
Q&A here.
And while you're doing that, I'm going to stop the recording.